Tell me when, Doris. Good morning and welcome. My name is Monica Banks Netherly, and I am privileged to be your guide for this tour today. I am a proud member of our Mother of Mercy Catholic Church, located in 5th Ward in Houston, Texas, under the leadership of Father Rodney J. Armstrong. I am also a BOI, and for those of you who are unfamiliar with that acronym, it stands for Born on the Island. I am a 5th generation Texan on my daddy's side, and on my mother's side, all of her people came from Opelousas and New Iberia. And it looks like Louisiana is in the house. What I'd like to do this morning is to provide you with a brief history of some of the important events that occurred in Galveston that will help make the tour more meaningful and relevant as we visualize the various sites that are on the tour. It is my hope that what I'm able to share with you will make it all a little bit more relevant. Let me first of all say that I am not a historian, but I am a lover of history. I am what you call a history aficionado. Let me thank you for being here, and let me express special thanks to Miss Evelyn Wright, Miss Gloria Aldridge, and Deacon and Mrs. Charles Allen, because they're the ones that twisted my arm to do this. No, just kidding. Archaeological evidence indicates that the Karankawa and Akokisa tribes, these were the Indian tribes, they were on the island and in the Galveston Bay Area thousands of years ago before ever having any contact with Europeans. Further evidence reveals that humans inhabited the Galveston area approximately 7,000 to 4,000 BC. Certain cultural markers reveal that the very distinctive rockport pottery created by the Karankawa Indians lets us know that the Karankawa tribe was on the island as early as 1250 AD. The Spaniards were the first people that visited and explored the Gulf Coast area. And an individual by the name of Alonso Alvarez de Pineda, that expedition from Spain claimed all of the Gulf Coast area. It's important for you to realize that the first formal record and documentation of the presence of the Karankawa Indians was made by an explorer by the name of Alva Nunez Cabeza de Vaca. He shipwrecked on Galveston Island in 1528. He actually wasn't on the island, he was around the island, and he shipwrecked with a Moroccan Muslim-born slave named Estevanico. Estevanico is also referred to as Esteban. Now, historians want to make Esteban nothing more than a footnote, but he is extremely important to the history of the Gulf Coast area. He was the first known person of African ancestry to visit America, to explore America. He was one of the first individuals, the first explorer, to even see the Mississippi River, and he lived 7 years among the indigenous people in the 16th century. He is critically important to the American Southwest history. The first European settlements were established by the Spanish, who claimed, as I mentioned before, the Gulf Coast area and established missions and presidios. Presidio is nothing but a fort. In the late 1600s and early 1700s, Galveston's name originated in 1786 when surveyor Jose de Evia named the Galveston Bay in honor of the Spanish governor, Viceroy Bernardo de Galvez, and the city was subsequently named after this particular governor. Jean Lafitte, a French pirate and slaveholder, built a kingdom in Galveston. and he was around in the about 1818, and the U.S. Navy forced him to leave, and he burned down his so-called kingdom and left at night while his kingdom was on fire. Spain governed all of Mexico during this time period, and Texas was a part of this area. Well, we know it's Texas. Oops, sorry. The Spanish were quite pervasive in this area, and the Mexican people decided they wanted to get from under Spanish rule. So in 1810, they revolted against Spanish rule, and thus began the Mexican Revolution. It lasted 11 years. It lasted from 1810 to 1821. And once the Mexicans became independent as an independent country, they negotiated an agreement with a gentleman by the name of Stephen F. Austin. Stephen Fuller Austin was a Virginian who worked with the Mexican government to arrange for white settlers to begin occupying Texas, or what we know as Texas. And then in 1821, the first people from the United States began, white Texans, white Americans, United States citizens, began to move into Texas. And by the 1830s, there were more Anglos in this area than there were Mexicans. Now you're talking about a different culture, a different race of people, a different religion, and different customs. Mexico had outlawed slavery, but these people from America were proponents of slavery. These people that were settling Texas had slaves, bought slaves, and wanted to perpetuate slavery. The Mexican government, because now Mexico is now Mexican, not Spanish, it's under Mexican rule. The Mexican people made a strategic, or the government rather, made a strategic mistake when they allowed Texans to come in, because the Texans began to think of it as their country and not Mexican. And so in 1836, the white Texans revolted against Mexican rule, and thus began the Texas Revolution. The revolution only lasted a little over 6 months. Texas won its independence, and 10 years, and became actually the Republic of Texas. And 10 years later, it was annexed to the United States in 1845 as the 28th state. So I think it's important for you to understand the Indian influence, the Spanish influence, the Mexican influence, the Anglo influence, and the slave influence that all presented a very diverse Texas that we have right now. So all of this was part of the legacy from these Indians that were on the island way back in 1250 AD. Just a second. And so the slave population flourished in Texas because Texas, as you know, was a slave state. And so Texas got their independence. They became the 45th state. Now they're part of the United States. Now they want to continue with slavery. And then in 1863, the Civil War began. And during the Civil War, Galveston proved to be a vital port for the Confederacy, serving as a key hub for supply lines and cotton exports. The Union's Navy blockade aimed to disrupt this crucial trade route, making Galveston a strategic target. The Battle of Galveston, and we're going to see a landmark in Galveston about that, was a significant event in the Civil War, held January 1st, 1863, and the Confederates attacked this area and expelled occupying Union troops from the city, demonstrating the importance of the Galveston port. Before the 1900 storm, Galveston was the second richest city per capita in the United States and was dubbed the Wall Street of the South. It had a flourishing banking industry, retail, success on the Strand, and had many of Texas's firsts. Galveston had the first opera house, the first bank, the first post office, and the first telephone. In 1899, Galveston was at the peak of its prominence and held a higher status and greater prosperity than Houston. It was the world's foremost cotton export and the fifth most important port in the U.S. In summary, in 1899, Galveston was the established leader in Texas in terms of commerce, wealth, and prestige. The 1900 storm devastated Galveston and killed an estimated 6,000 to 8,000 people, according to Galveston and Texas History Center. The Library of Congress chronicling American notes that over 8,000 people perished, while Britannica mentions that some accounts estimate a number as high as 12,000 deaths. There are no exact numbers of the deaths, only estimates. And it has been designated as the deadliest natural disaster in U.S. history. And there is a 1900 memorial in Galveston that we're going to visit that, it's dedicated to the lives that were lost. This deadly hurricane is important because it changed Galveston's destiny. And I have a little bit more to say about that tonight because I am the descendant of three individuals that survived the 1900 storm. And I'm going to share with you some of the accounts of my great-grandfather, who was a primary source because he witnessed this great storm. He was 24 years old. My great-grandmother was 22, and my grandmother was a baby. She was born in 1899, and they actually survived the storm. So through oral history, I'll be able to share with you my great-grandfather's account of the storm. He lived to be 96, and he was lucid and very alert until his death. So through oral history, through my great-grandfather and my father, repeating these stories throughout my childhood, I'll be able to give you some, not firsthand, but an account from someone who was there, who actually witnessed the 1900 storm. As you know, we celebrate Juneteenth because on Galveston Island, the slaves of Texas finally learned that they had gained their freedom on June 19th, 1865. On this day, Major General Granger issued Order Number 3 in Galveston to inform the people of Texas that the Emancipation Proclamation had been signed and all of the slaves in Texas and throughout the nation were free. This message took more than 2.5 years to reach Texas, thereby enabling slaveholders to continue to enslave Black people after the proclamation had been announced. Juneteenth became a symbolic date representing African American freedom. Juneteenth celebrations occur all through Texas, but they began in Galveston when there were 250,000 slaves in Texas. And today, 28 states recognize this holiday as a state and paid holiday, as well as the District of Columbia. And in 2021, President Biden declared Juneteenth a national holiday. We had not had a national holiday declared since 1983, when Martin Luther King Day was declared, Martin Luther King Jr. So this is definitely something to celebrate. And I wanted to, share with you some of this history because Texas is a diverse state and so many flags and people and different races help to make up the history of this country. And it is, I believe, extremely important and noteworthy to recognize the contribution of all of these areas and groups so that you have an appreciation of their culture, of what they brought to make this the state that it is. And I'm going to, just open it up if anybody wants to say anything. And I'll resume when we get to the various sites. But I think, you needed to hear a little bit about this. You may have already known about it. And I'm sorry if I, shared with you something you already knew. But brought some new information to you so that you can digest as we approach the various sites in Galveston. Thank you. Thank you.
My sister-in-law's mother used to work with the
George Mitchell?
George Mitchell.
Okay.
And at their summer house, we would go there and see newspaper articles from back when, the colored, the opera and all that you're talking about.
Yes.
They have sold that property. Do you know if those articles or that history went to the Sterling Library or anything?
I don't know if it went to the Sterling Library, but they've got a Galveston Historical Foundation, and I am going to speculate that they probably wanted to get their hands on it as well.
It was amazing history.
Yeah.
But it was like words that make us cringe when they talk about the colored dancers and, how little bit of money they were making at the time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But it was very interesting.
Oh, I'm sure Galveston has a fascinating history. Being raised there, I was always intrigued by some of the things that went on. I was raised Catholic and began kindergarten in 1960. I was born in 55. So in 1960, I turned 5 and I attended Holy Rosary School's kindergarten. Now, I lived on the east end of the island. And my parents had 4 stair steps. My daddy was a mailman, and he had to be at work early in the morning at 6:30, 6 o'clock. My mother didn't drive, and they had 1 car. So I was 5, my sister was 6. So I was in kindergarten, she was in 1st grade. I had a brother that was 2 years younger than me, who hadn't started school yet, and I had a baby brother that was born in 1958. So my mother had to get on the bus with 4 children, 2 babies, and make her way past St. Mary's School, which was on the east end, on the bus, past Sacred Heart, which is also on the east end, closer to our house, and get us to Holy Rosary. My father was extremely frustrated for what my mother had endured that year. So my father went to the Monsignor at Sacred Heart. Sacred Heart is one of the sites you're going to visit. The big white church on 14th and Broadway with the dome, the beautiful, probably most magnificent Catholic church in Galveston. He made an appointment with Monsignor O'Sullivan, and he told the Monsignor what my mother had to go through. And he said, "Can I register my girls at Sacred Heart?" And Monsignor said, "Yes, you can, Mr. Banks." And in 1961, my sister and I desegregated Sacred Heart School. Thank you. My father was the first Black usher at Sacred Heart, and he was the first Black Boy Scout leader. When he died in 2003, one of my girlfriends from work, because I was living in Houston at the time, she said, "Monica, there were so many white people at your daddy's funeral." I said, "Well, he was a member of a parish that was predominantly white, and he desegregated this parish. He made this a better parish, and the people that are here at this funeral are recognizing his contribution to Sacred Heart." And by the time I finished Sacred Heart and started O'Connell Junior High School, the Catholic junior high school, there were many Black children that were attending Sacred Heart School. So I'm real happy to, you know, let you know how we changed that school and made it better. And the other Catholic schools, and there were many Catholic schools in Galveston, which were all segregated, except for, of course, Holy Rosary. And, you know, they were all desegregated in the 60s. But I believe Sacred Heart was the very first Catholic school to desegregate it. My father wasn't that he was a political activist. It was out of necessity. He wanted to ease the burden of my mother. We were Catholic, and why should she have to go all those blocks west when we could walk to Sacred Heart? Because Sacred Heart was on 14th and Broadway, and we were on 11th and L. And it changed, you know, it made it so much better for, not just from a logistical standpoint, but it made it so much better for the school to have a more diverse population. So I'm very proud of what Mama and Daddy did, because it took a great deal of courage to desegregate in 1961. So just wanted you guys to know that. Does anybody else have anything they want to share? Their experiences with Catholic schools or Galveston or just Juneteenth? Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say, I would say the teachers were tough. They gave me a good foundation. The one thing I have to say is because they were anti-Black books on the current books. So when I proceeded to public school, I was a little behind, but I had that foundation that God gave me. And those of us who went to public school academically succeeded because of the foundation.
You had a good foundation in Catholic schools. Yeah, I that was my experience as well. In 1961, they divided us in first grade into groups because we were beginning to learn how to read. Now, I had gone to kindergarten and I knew the alphabet, but I couldn't read. But we were starting to read, and they were beginning to introduce a new technique in teaching children how to read, and it was phonics. And we were some of the first children in Galveston to learn how to read through phonics. And they're going back to phonics now. Children in other schools were learning to read through rote memory and just repeating sentences over and over and over. But we were learning to sound out the alphabet, and it was very instrumental in helping you to look at unfamiliar language and be able to recognize the sounds of the alphabet and to read in a more proficient manner. So I feel like I got a very, very good education in Catholic school. I went on to the University of Houston from O'Connell High School, and that was the Catholic high school in Galveston. I graduated in 1973, and I was a somewhat mediocre student in high school. I got in my first semester there, I made the dean's list. And I have to attribute that to that Catholic school education, because a lot of the things that I had already been, you know, introduced to in Catholic school, they reviewed at the University of Houston, and all I had to do was review it. I didn't start from scratch. For example, in American history, we had been introduced to the autobiography of Malcolm X. We had been forced to read that. We had been forced to read Uncle Tom's Cabin. Those are pretty good-sized books. And I got there and I said, oh gosh, I've already read them. I'll just skim them now. And we had discussed them at length. The nuns and priests were very progressive at our high school. We had even read some of the works of the Black Panthers, Soul on Ice by George Cleaver, and many of those books. So many of those nuns were Ursuline and Dominican nuns and Christian brothers. They were very active in the civil rights movement. So they had that kind of angle of vision to expose us to literature that was not really necessarily on the public school book list. And it's so important to have that kind of academic freedom because it exposes children to so much more than just the way you think it should have been, but the way it actually was. And as citizens of the United States, libraries and freedom of speech and being able to have your children be exposed to a myriad of different types of literature and histories and biographies is critically important to letting them know how the world was and what kind of world they want it to be. And thank you, ma'am, for letting us know about your parochial school education. Yes, ma'am. Yes, Anita.
I can remember when we was in Texas, from the Galveston, we eat, but then we went to this one black restaurant that looked like it sold the best fried chicken. And it was where all the black people came to eat out.
Well, Anita, I would have to guess, based on my knowledge of Galveston, that you were on 27th, 28th, or 29th Street and Seawall Boulevard, or right off the boulevard. And I'm going to further speculate that you were at the Jambalaya Cafe, owned by Albert Feast.
Yes.
That's one of the areas we're going to pass. Galveston was segregated in the 40s and 50s and before that. And a gentleman by the name of Gus Allen from Louisiana came to Galveston, and he was an entrepreneur. And Gus Allen somehow raised money and started cooking and started developing Galveston, bought some property near the beach, 27th, 28th, 29th Street, and he built a hotel. And back then, black people were not able to go to hotels because of segregation. So he had a hotel for black people. It was called Gus Allen's Hotel. He had a nightclub in Galveston, and he had a restaurant called Gus Allen's Restaurant. He helped Albert Feast, who was also from Louisiana, to buy and run the jambalaya. And that was some of the best seafood in Galveston. These are people from Louisiana that made Texas their home and helped develop jobs and businesses and entrepreneurship in Galveston. So Galveston has a number of people from Louisiana that helped build the island. My great aunt, Oberia Banks Strode, was married to another man from Louisiana. His name was B.J. Strode. And he owned a funeral home in Galveston. He owned a hotel in Chicago. And he employed many of the bank's family members, his in-laws. And he had an airplane in the 1940s, black man flying an airplane, but unfortunately he perished in that same airplane over one of the swamps of Louisiana. But the point is not his death, but the significant contribution that he made to Galveston businesses. And B.J. Strode had a mentor named T.D. Armstrong, Thomas Armstrong. And I believe he had roots in Louisiana too, and he came from the Golden Triangle, but he got to the Golden Triangle in Galveston by way of Louisiana, from Louisiana. And he ended up, and the funeral home became Strode Armstrong Mortuary. But a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of contributions from people from Louisiana to help build the island and to produce jobs and businesses that helped African Americans to be employed and to dream another kind of dream. It's quite interesting. And let me add this: there was yet another man from Louisiana named Kermit Kerrville. Mr. Kerrville was younger. He was born in 1934. His family migrated from Opelousas, and he attended public schools. He was baptized at Holy Rosary Catholic Church, which we're going to see, and he was a coach at Central High School. He graduated from Southern High School and came back to Galveston because his family migrated from Opelousas. He went back to Louisiana for his, college, and then came back to Galveston. And he was a football coach, a great football coach. And then in 1968, the schools in Galveston desegregated. Actually, they did more than desegregate; they integrated, because they'd been desegregating in the in like 65, 66. But in 1968, Central High School had its last all-black graduating class, and the students at Central High School came to Ball High and completely integrated Ball High. So now you're talking about a population that was mostly completely white, and it's now almost half black. Coach Kerrville was a football coach, but he was not able to get into a leadership position, and under the Ball High regime. So he decided they didn't have a track coach, so he decided to lead the track team, and he applied for the track directorship, and he was the head coach over the track and field. This is the 70s, the late 60s, and this was a time when black men were not allowed to be great. But Coach Kerrville created his own lane, and through his coaching genius, helped Ball High win 5 state championships in track and field for the boys, and 1 state championship in the girls' track and field. He was incredible. He became the first black athletic director in Galveston Independent School District. And the stadium that you're going to hopefully see today on 26th Street was named after Kermit Kerrville. And check this out, he was also Catholic. So I'm real proud of him. I knew him, and he was absolutely phenomenal. He created a community of young people, young men and women through track and field that went on to do great things. And he believed in equality, inclusion, and excellence. He worked his athletes very, very hard, and he stressed the academic aspects of their lives so that when they got through with their athletic careers, they would be able to enjoy jobs that required the academic components of an education. He's one of my heroes. I can't speak enough of Kermit Kerrville and what he went through, what he had to do. And the original track is still standing. It was a cinder track, and that's not the best kind of track to run on, but he made the best of a bad situation and won for Galveston's Ball High. He won those state championships. He made Galveston Ball High track and field a powerhouse, not only locally and statewide, but a powerhouse nationally. Just a phenomenal, phenomenal individual. And that's some black history you may not know of, but if you ever see the stadium named after Kermit Kerrville, you'll know a little bit about what Kermit did. Where are we now?
We're in Galveston. We just crossed.
If we cross the causeway, get there.
Come to it.
As we approach the causeway, I want to point out a few things. We haven't exactly gotten there yet, but we are getting close. And I'm going to go ahead and start a little bit about the items on the areas on the sites on the tour. Just give me a second. The watered area is the Galveston Bay. And I'll tell you a little bit about the Galveston Bay. It's an inlet in the Gulf of Mexico on the southeastern shore of Texas. Galveston's Bay, 600 miles of surface area, is commonly divided into 4 major sub-bays: the Galveston Bay, the Trinity Bay, the West Bay, and the East Bay. The Galveston Bay is bordered by 3 counties: Chambers, Harris, and Galveston County. Galveston Bay is the largest estuary in Texas. Now, if you can see to your left, that is the original Galveston Causeway. That causeway was built in 1912, and it was built for both rail and automobile traffic. The causeway that we know today is named the George and Cynthia Mitchell Memorial Causeway, and it is just for automobile traffic. It carries automobiles southward and northward from 45, Interstate 45. And all of the rail traffic, as I mentioned earlier, is to the left, the old causeway. The original causeway, as I said, was built in 1912. The newer version was built in 39, and yet another version was built later that we're on right now. The original route was listed on the National Registry of Historic Places in 1976, and construction of replacement bridges for both the auto routes began in 2003, and the northbound was completed in 2005, and the southbound bridge was completed in 2008. We, of course, are on the southbound bridge. To your left is the northbound bridge. And I had relatives that were older relatives, great aunts and uncles that were expressed, well, especially my aunts, they expressed a little fear about getting on the causeway. And my sisters and I, my siblings, we would laugh at them. But, these were people that, had no experience with anything quite this high, and they were a little bit fearful. But once they went over the first time with my father, they calmed down. And we are on the about to enter Galveston now. It's the main street in Galveston. It goes directly from the causeway. You go directly from the causeway to Broadway. The other main street in Galveston is Seawall Boulevard. The causeway is the main access point, roadway access point into Galveston. The second access point into Galveston is the Bolivar Ferry. But coming from Houston, this is where everybody comes. And all this area, that's part of the Galveston Bay. If you look to your right, and that little pyramid that you can see all the way in those buildings, that's Moody Gardens. The Moody's were a philanthropic family that donated a lot of money to Galveston and has one of the largest philanthropic foundations in the United States. They fund scholarships. Moody's name is all over the place, and I'm sure you've heard of the various Moody establishments. You can't hit 61st from here. You're going to have to change lanes. Yeah, you got to get to the right. The things that I know that are incorrect, I'll try to. Yeah, yeah. You're the lead bus though. He'll follow you. He'll follow you. 61st is a busy street with a lot of businesses, a lot of hotels. We are approaching Seawall Boulevard. We're approaching Seawall Boulevard, but 61st has a lot of businesses, a lot of hotels. There's a lot of commerce that goes on, and this is this is actually, I believe, the Catholic cemetery, right here to your right. I was trying to find the Rosewood Cemetery. It is in a rather obscure location, and my husband and I went all through the cemeteries this week. So uh, I'm pretty sure this is the Catholic. And you see a lot of the crosses, and you see the surnames that are traditionally very ethnic and Catholic. A lot of Spanish names, Italian names, Irish names, because it is the Catholic cemetery. Galveston had mostly segregated cemeteries, and it is for this reason that the African Americans in the early 1900s bought the land for the Rosewood Cemetery. Now, interestingly enough, my great grandparents, they were buried on the cemetery in the cemetery on Broadway, which has every race, but most of the cemeteries at the time were segregated. Now you want to try to make your way into the right lane. You'll make a right on Seawall.
Monica,
Yes.
can you do me a favor and state your full name again? Because there are some people just tuning in have been requesting.
Oh, Monica Banks Netherly. I'm a BOI. I'm born on the island and a member of our Mother of Mercy Catholic Church
Thank you.
in Houston, in Fifth Ward, Texas.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's Paul's church.
Okay. We're gonna, as soon as we get past, go a little slower, and we're gonna keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Rosewood is easy to miss. Okay. Golden Corral. Slow down right here. And I'm sorry I didn't alert you quick enough. It's a sharp turn. Turn right here.
Stop sign.
I hope so. See, I went to it. I
know, or on the other buses where we're headed?
We are headed to the Rosewood Cemetery. It's off of Seawall Boulevard. You're going to make a sharp right once you see the Golden Corral. The lead bus will be guiding you to the Rosewood Cemetery. It is the oldest African American cemetery in Galveston. That's a question. I will repeat the question from the passengers. Yes, absolutely. Rosewood Cemetery off 63rd and Seawall Boulevard was created by the Rosewood Cemetery Association. It's to your left. It was founded by African American citizens in Galveston around 1911, and they purchased the land from the Levy family. Ownership was divided among shareholders, including churches, associations, societies, and individuals. The cemetery served as Galveston's first burial ground designated exclusively for African Americans during a time when blacks were barred from many other cemeteries. A plot for an adult was $10, while a plot for a child was $6.50. A gravedigger's fee was added to your fee of $2. The first burial, according to records, was that of Robert Bailey, a 14-day-old child. And the last burial was in 1944 of a gentleman by the name of Frank Boyer. While records indicate 411 burials, only about 20 markers remain visible today, according to the Galveston Historical Foundation. So that is Rosewood Cemetery. There's a marker, a historical marker behind you that you probably, but it just speaks of what a plot was. I was down here yesterday and got the information about what it costs to be buried in the cemetery. $10 for an adult, $6.50 for a child, and then of course $2 for the gravedigger's fee.
Okay. So there's a question on the chat asking, how did your grandfather survive the flood?
My great grandfather.
Great grandfather, sorry.
I'm not that old. He was in a horse and buggy, and he had my great grandmother, and my grandmother was a baby, and my grandmother's godfather was in the horse and buggy also, and he had a horse whip, and he was making his way from the East End across Broadway, trying to get to Rosenberg Elementary School, when a white man hailed him and he said, "Go the other way. The school is flooding. So Papa Banks turned around and headed west to the courthouse. The white man said, go to the courthouse. Papa made it to the courthouse, but before he got to the courthouse, about 10 blocks west, he turned around and he saw part of Rosenberg Elementary School implode. He made it to the courthouse, and that's where him and my great-grandmother and my grandmother, and of course my grandmother's godfather, who had the horsewhip, that's where they survived during the storm. And if you get a chance, go to Rosenberg Library on the 4th floor. There is a 1900 storm exhibit, and I saw it in preparation for this bus tour, and having family members that survived, it just brought tears to my eyes. And you don't have to have a relative to look at the anguish of some of the victims that perished in this horrific storm. They have bodies laid out in photographs that just will make you cry. Just how could anybody survive something like this? Galveston was on an elevation of 9 feet above sea level. The storm surge was 16 feet. Galveston was essentially underwater. And how I told my husband, I said, how did Papa Banks make it? And how did he get a horse and buggy in 1900 on a janitor's salary? How was he able to even afford that? He had that horse and buggy, and thank God he did, because I'm here to tell the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very remarkable, the resilience of the people in Galveston. How can you withstand a 16-foot storm surge? And let's not forget, there was no seawall. Absolutely incredible. Just God protected them. And the Rosenberg Library Rosenberg Elementary School that my grandfather was headed for, the great grandfather, it did not totally get destroyed, but it did. A part of it was destroyed, and I'm glad he made it to the courthouse, because he might have been as a part that was, imploded. But thank God that man told him and redirected his, path, so that he was able to make it to the courthouse. The courthouse was downtown, and the courthouse survived.
Wow.
The
Amazing story.
a very very fascinating, incredible, disastrous storm, and the fact that anybody survived that kind of surge, 16 feet, and you're just not that many feet above sea level, is quite remarkable. And those people that don't believe in God have to wonder. I know I don't have to wonder. It was nobody but Almighty God. And that horsewhip. I first heard the story about the horsewhip, and I said, "Oh, that's just so unkind." And my brother says, "Monica, they'd have taken the horsewhip. If he hadn't had the horsewhip, they'd have taken the horse and buggy away from him, and we wouldn't even be here." And these people were desperate. They were on flooded streets, and they were trying to get to safety. And if you don't know how to swim like me, what you gonna do? You're gonna die. But thank God, my great grandfather had that horse and buggy. 2/3 of Galveston was lost in terms of debris, buildings, and lives. The population was completely depleted, and the island was devastated. And that's when Houston took hold and began to become prominent, because Galveston was at its peak before the 1900 storm. Its peak in prominence, in wealth, and in innovation and everything else. First telephones, first gas lights, first electric lights, first opera house, first post office, first bank. Just innovative, and oh, sorry. And first high school for African Americans, which we will pass by. But survived. Great grandfather.
Okay. But
located at 4201 Broadway. I don't know if you can access Broadway, but that is a much larger cemetery that had every
What's the address?
4201 Broadway.
Okay.
Yeah, look, you're gonna go back to Broadway. It's after Rosewood. You're on number F. It says Old City Cemetery. That's the plan.
So everybody here on the bus, you know where Rosewood Cemetery is, right? Right there.
Yeah. First African American for African Americans. Okay. Created in 1911. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sure developers wanted to relocate the cemetery, build something here.
Developers, I'm not sure what developers wanted. We can certainly speculate they did, but the African American community in Galveston has been working very hard to make this a historical marker and to acknowledge this cemetery for what it represented in Galveston. And yes, I think you could speculate that and be correct, but I'm not sure. I'd just be speculating. The lady asked about, one of our passengers asked about developers wanting to develop this cemetery, and I'm just speculating. I don't know. I don't have any factual information. I do know factually that the African American community has worked really hard to get this recognized as the first Black cemetery in Galveston, and it probably is not a stretch to believe that the developers were trying to, would like to get their, hands on this.
Oh. So the question is, what year was the Rosewood Cemetery started?
1911.
Wow.
Rosewood Cemetery was started in 1911. That was the question that was asked. Started in 1911 by a group of African Americans in Galveston called the Rosewood Cemetery Association. And it was comprised of citizens, organizations, and individuals and various societies as well as churches. So we were denied in many cemeteries to be able to bury our kinfolk. So what do you do when you are denied? You get creative and you buy your own plot and you create your own cemetery. Yes, ma'am. Yes, Anita.
What year did they get the historical marker?
The historical marker, I'm not sure. I don't have that information. I'm sorry. I don't think it's been up there very long though. Yeah. And yes, ma'am, in the dark glasses.
Assuming there were additional grave markers, you know what happened to them?
Well, we had so many hurricanes, and I'm sure some of the markers were lost because, according to my notes, there were about over 400 markers, and various storms. And Galveston has been bombarded with hurricanes and natural disasters. So I would have to say that the storms got rid of some of them, and there was not the attention given to the Rosewood Cemetery as was given to many of the other cemeteries. The funding was not there and the attention. As a result, you have neglect and you don't have the ability to preserve those grave sites. Question was asked, what happened to some of the other markers? And the funding wasn't there and the attention to this particular cemetery was not really that, that strong.
I'm kind of curious, how did African Americans in Galveston during the storm fare, and then after the storm? Is there any data that kind of shows how they were
Treated?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some data. Let me ask.
Can you repeat it? We can't hear what the question is.
Oh, the question was during the storm, during and after the storm, how did African Americans who lived in Galveston fare? How did they do? Is there any data to show it?
There's some data in terms of the number of deaths. I can't recite that to you, but I was startled at the number of people that died. Now, I read to you what is estimated between 6 and 8,000, some as high as 12,000. But it was a lot of African Americans that perished on the island. And what happened, because the island was so badly flooded, traditional burials could not take place. Several feet of water, you couldn't bury anybody. So what the city officials initially did was put the first barge had 700 bodies. They took that barge out into the Gulf of Mexico and dumped those bodies in the Gulf. Okay? They thought they had solved the problem, but a few days later, the bodies started washing ashore. Okay? So now you're dealing with decomposing bodies and a real potential health risk. So black people, many black people, were charged with what's called funeral pyres. Piles of bodies were burning on East Beach and West Beach, and they burnt the bodies. They had no choice. They couldn't dump them in the Gulf and expect them to stay in the Gulf. So they started burning the bodies, and for weeks, black men and women were forced, some at gunpoint, to burn these bodies. They call funeral pyres, Pyre, and that's how. And then there was, because we're dealing with now a lot of racism. Black men were accused of looting the dead bodies. So some, not a lot, but a few black men were executed. But they were forced at gunpoint to burn those bodies. A lot of black men and women. And I researched that on the fourth floor of Rosenberg Library. And all of that that's why I'm encouraging you, if you get a chance, the racism is illuminated at the library, at Rosenberg Library. And you can see, to answer Doris's question, how were black people treated? This is not how everybody was treated, but a large percentage of African Americans were enduring not just the devastation of the storm and all of its after effects, but the devastating aspects of racism, being falsely accused of looting bodies and being forced to do the arduous and difficult, extremely horrific task of burning bodies. And you're talking about sweltering heat, humidity, and devastation all over the island, and decomposing bodies because they're going under buildings that had been destroyed, and they're continuing to find these dead bodies. So it was a absolutely horrible job. And black people weren't the only ones burning the bodies, but they were forced into burning the bodies sometimes at gunpoint. This is also something my great grandfather shared with me. So what I'm reading is also what I heard as a child, and I was 17 when he died. So I was old enough to have a real good understanding of some of what he went through. I wasn't a 5-year-old. I'm listening to these stories, and I'm 16, 15 years old. I'm I'm cognizant of what he's saying. I'm aware of what he's, conveying to me.
One of the questions from the chat asks, were African Americans able to recover their land after the flood? Or were there any issues?
I am unaware of the question was, were African Americans able to recover their property after the storm? There was so much devastation. A lot of the homes were destroyed. Let's not forget 2/3 of the property in Galveston was destroyed. So it begs the question, what was left? There wasn't a whole lot left. I have no information on the recovery process in terms of what they went through to regain their property. But my answer to that is, based on the number and the numbers of deaths and the sheer totality of the devastation, it wasn't a whole lot to claim.
Real property is real property.
I'm talking about the homes. I have no information on their ability to reclaim the property, the actual property itself. You're right, the property was still there. The homes were destroyed. Most of the homes were destroyed. Now we're going to be we're going to be passing some of the, before we get to the cemetery, which is located at 4201 Broadway. We're going to pass some historical sites, and I'm going to try to pay attention so that if we pass something, I will be able to share with you what it is that we're, if it's something that I'm aware of, that I can share with you what it is. This is the main street. This is Broadway. This is the street we came down. Once we left the causeway rose right into Broadway. This is one of the main streets in Galveston, along with the Seawall Boulevard. That's the courthouse to your left, the new courthouse. That's not the courthouse my great-grandfather was headed for. He was headed for the courthouse in downtown Galveston.
Is that courthouse still up?
Not the original building. No.
Not original. Okay.
The location is still there. Galveston has a diverse religious population and many Black churches that are over 100 years old, some of which we will see. I know we're going to pass by Reedy Chapel. Reedy Chapel is very old. This same great-grandfather that was in the 1900 storm, before the invention of the incandescent light, he hung the chandelier at this church. And I'm just so proud of the contribution he made to the island. He was a great-grandfather, a wonderful great-grandfather. My great-grandmother, when she married him, she belonged to another church that's over 100 years old. It's called Avenue L Missionary Baptist Church. And when she married him, she stopped going to Avenue L, but that's another very historical church. She joined Reedy Chapel, which is on Broadway. And I guess you're wondering, how did she become Catholic? With great-grandparents with AME. My mother was from Opelousas. Her people were from Opelousas, and they weren't Catholic. They were Baptist. And my daddy was Catholic. And when my parents married in 1953, the priest that blessed their marriage said, "Mr. Banks, you got to promise all your children to the Catholic Church." And that's how I ended up being Catholic. The Catholic Church is pretty forceful. When you married a non-Catholic, you had to promise those babies to the church. And before I was even born, I was promised to the Catholic Church. And I'm so glad I was.
Amen.
To your left was where a lot of the cotton, activities took place. That no longer existed. And I don't know if you remember, but in 1976, Galveston's grain elevator blew up. And the grain elevator no longer exists, but it was on the left near the wharf. But we haven't passed that. But just something that to remind you, lot of activities going on in Galveston, a lot of commerce. Galveston was a very big cotton exporting city. And the second largest, most active port west of New Orleans. And many slaves came in to Galveston. A high activity level, a high number of traffic in slavery. Yeah, there's your cemetery. That's the cemetery to you. If you'll look, please, to your right, from the bus, that is the cemetery that we want to look at. That's the 45th Street. The Old City Cemetery. And It's a very old cemetery, established in 1839. It's the oldest cemetery in Galveston and is a collection of 7 cemeteries with boundaries that touch. It has 12,000 markers, which represent a portion of the bodies buried in the site. As many of the graves were reused or had multiple burials within the same plot. There are as many as 3 layers of bodies in many of these plots. This layering created a multi-layered burial system, with some graves having, as I said, as many as 3 bodies above the other one. The cemetery reflects the diverse social and ethnic makeup of Galveston, with areas being separated by faith, race, and social status. The front cemeteries are Evergreen, Oleander, and Old City, with Hebrew, New City, Old Catholic, and Episcopal from 1830s to the 1840s. Many prominent Galvestonians are buried in this cemetery, and my great-grandparents who survived the 1900 storm are buried in this cemetery. It was, so, you know, we had segregation, but they got in there. And I can't remember what my father said. Papa Banks had connections with a lot of bank officials. He was the janitor at the bank. And I believe his connections with some of these prominent Galvestonians provided him with an advantage in terms of being able to work his way through what he normally wouldn't have been able to achieve.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's Rosewood. I mean, I'm sorry, that's Old City. What did you say?
Oh, the name of the cemetery?
Old City. I'm
Old
sorry,
City
that's
Cemetery.
Old City. That is a very diverse population in that cemetery. All ethnic groups, and the oldest cemetery in Galveston, and it is called Old City Cemetery, established in 1839. So it was established years before the Civil War. What's your next stop?
This was the church.
Black churches.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's, morning close
Oh,
to the church.
Okay, there are lots of historic black churches.
And it's,
Holy Rosary.
yeah.
Okay.
20, 30.
Okay, you're gonna need to go. You're gonna head east. Yeah, but I think the first, before we get to Holy Rosary, before we head down when we get on Broadway, we're going to pass Reedy Chapel. That's one of the very, very historic churches in Galveston. That is the oldest African American church in Galveston. Reedy Chapel AME. My great grandparents were members of that church. Okay, so you're going to get back on Broadway. This is a residential area by the cemetery, and there are a few stories about haunting experiences in this cemetery, and I'm sure none of y'all are superstitious.
Mm-mm.
But lots of activities occurred with live people in this cemetery, especially with teenagers when I was coming up. I don't know if that still occurs now, but it was a meeting place for young lovers. Oh. No disrespect intended to the dead. There's some mausoleums, and many of the more wealthy and prominent citizens would purchase those mausoleums, which are very, very expensive. My great grandparents in a regular grave with a small marker. And on any given summer day, this cemetery is just flooded with yellow wildflowers. And I remarked to my father before he died, why don't they clean up the cemetery? You want to get back on Broadway? Why don't they clean up the cemetery? And then I talked to somebody who said, "Oh, I think those flowers are beautiful. I like that." So everybody's got their own angle of vision. And then I started looking at the flowers in a different way. And you're gonna make a right at the stop sign. These are pretty old graves, a lot of them. You think about 1839, my God, that was a long time ago.
Mm.
Right before we got to the cemetery, called Jack Johnson Boulevard. Does anybody recognize that name? You wanna, pardon me? He was a boxer. He wasn't just a boxer though. He was the first African American heavyweight champion in the world, of the world. And he came from Galveston.
Yeah.
There is at Reedy Chapel, I mean at Old Central, there's a Jack Johnson Park and a statue of him. But Jack Johnson was quite an individual. 41st Street is where we passed that, where his street is named. His name was John Arthur Jack Johnson. And in 1908, he won the heavyweight championship of the world. Just wanted to let y'all know that. We'll talk a little bit more about him later. When we pass this intersection to your right, the right side of Broadway is St. Patrick's Cathedral. This is a cathedral that was established in 1870, mostly for Irish. It became the Holy Family Parish, and it became the Holy Family after Hurricane Ike. But this is St. Patrick's, and that's a picture of St. Patrick's in that mural. It was founded by a lot of Galvestonians. Some of them were Irish, and Holy Family now serves, and that's its location. And so St. Patrick's has a very rich history. A lot of Europeans, a lot of Irish immigrants populated, and the cathedral, if you ever get a chance, it is absolutely beautiful. Galveston has some of the most beautiful churches that you'll ever see. They're comparable to some of the churches that are in Europe. And just incredible architecture. Galveston consolidated after Ike, and Cardinal Daniel DiNardo created what they call the Holy Family, and that serves all of the Galveston Catholic churches. To your left is building behind the one I'm. Where are you going?
Very first.
Is it blocked?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh well, I was going to tell you where the more recently built Central High School was.
Like that church.
What church are you going to?
That's the one
See Reedy.
Holy Catholic.
Oh, you're going to Holy Rosary. Okay. We were very close to Reedy, but yeah. Okay, Holy Rosary.
They got a say a prayer. This is most of say a prayer.
Oh, we got to stop. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I was going to tell you a little bit about the more recently built Central High School, but we'll talk about that another time.
Just come get off and say a prayer.
and only parochial Holy Rosary School for Black children, established in 1886. In 1889, the church was founded as the oldest Black Catholic church in Texas. This is not the original site of the church, but this is the one that was created after the original one was destroyed. This is Holy Rosary. There was a school in that lot to your left, but the school was demolished. It's a beautiful, beautiful church. I was baptized at this church. Bishop Nicholas Gallagher started this church for African Americans, and it was organized, as I said, in 1889. In 1914, they moved to this location and to this present location. The elementary school closed down in 1979. And it's noteworthy that in 1927, the parish expanded and made a high school. So you had the first Black parochial high school in Galveston that was a part of Holy Rosary, which my father attended that high school, and then he transferred to Central. I have deep roots in this parish. My grandmother, who's in the 1900 storm, was buried here. And my parents received they were blessed by the priest that was here when my mother and father married in 1953. I made my first communion here. And the school that was on these grounds is where I attended before my family integrated desegregated Sacred Heart. It was a school, there was a hall and a cafeteria, and now there's just the parking lot. But this area, this school, this church, the school that was here, and the church has a lot of history in Galveston. Yes.
What order of nuns was assigned?
It was a black order from Louisiana. Okay, I think Paul is right. He said Holy Family Sisters. Yeah. And all my teachers, well, they had a few lay teachers. In fact, in kindergarten, I had a teacher named Miss Olivier, but everybody else had nuns. Yeah, and it was, what is it, Paul?
So Holy Family Sisters of the Water.
Yeah, I think they were the ones, and they were in 1961 and 1960 full habit, and they wore black habits.
Yeah.
All you saw were their face. You couldn't even see their neck, their hands and their face. And being the curious child that I was, when the bell rang and when the wind blowed, I found myself looking under the habit to see if they looked like my mother. Because as a curious child, they weren't quite like my mother because, my mother had 4 children and she's running around the house in bra and panties sometimes. And I just wanted to know, were the nuns like mama? And just, a 5-year-old, the curiosity of a 5-year-old child. But they were quite remarkable and quite wonderful teachers. I only had them for a year. My sister had them 2 years, and then we went to Sacred Heart. So I began first grade at Sacred Heart. Bernadette had them. She made her first communion at Holy Rosary. And interestingly enough, in this Holy Rosary area, Beyonce's mother grew up.
Yeah.
Tina Beyonce. She is from Galveston. Her mother's family and her father's family, her grandparents are all from Louisiana, but they grew up in Galveston. Beyonce's mother and her siblings and aunts and uncles, they all grew up here. And her mother was an expert seamstress and made the vestments that the priests wore, and just made a great contribution. They were Catholic. They were Catholic then. Beyonce's mother's maiden name is Beyonce. Beyonce's carrying the name of her mother. Her mother's surname, her maiden name, was Beyonce. I thought that was quite interesting. Deep roots in Galveston. This is Shiloh AME. This is one of the churches to your right. Shiloh AME is one of the oldest churches in Galveston. It is United Methodist Episcopal, and it is over 100 years old. It is a black church. Are you headed towards Old Central? Yeah. Oh, that's there you go. You're gonna see Kermit Kerrville's stadium and Old Central. Kermit Kerrville was the track coach that I talked to you about, that became the first athletic director, first black athletic director in Ball High School in Galveston Independent School District. And we're gonna pass his stadium. We're approaching it now. If you look to your right, Kerrville Stadium, named after the legendary Kermit Kerrville, Coach Kermit Kerrville. From Opelousas, raised in Galveston, baptized at Holy Road. Children attended Sacred Heart with my brothers. That's Kerrville Stadium. 5 state championships in track and field, and 1 state championship in the girls' track and field. Quite a genius, athletic in terms of his coaching abilities. He built a legacy of excellence in athleticism, in inclusion, and in focus on academic life. And there's no longer a cinder track, but that's the football stadium named after him. This is where Ball High plays, where he won those, helped them win those state championships. Across the street is the old Cultural Center, which was actually one of the sites of Central High School, the first African-American high school in Galveston. When we cross this intersection, keep straight, that's to your right is Central High School. This is not the original location. Central was founded in 1885. This is one of the newer locations. See Central High School, but this was not the original. This was a later one. And when we were on Broadway, the orange building that I couldn't tell you about, that became the later Central. And this was the very first African high school in Texas. The public library was annexed onto this, and the first public library for African Americans was connected to this school. This to your right, this park is the Jack Johnson Park. The park named after the first black heavyweight championship of the world. If you drive slowly, you can see his statue. You can see a small statue of Jack Johnson to your right. If you look through those bushes, you can see him. He led a most fascinating life. And if you'll stay here for just a minute, I'd like to share with you a little bit about this man. Born in 1908 and became the champion of the world and had 113 fights, and very few did he lose. And he was quite an individual. He was a man that defied the norms. During the height of Jim Crow segregation, this man was dating white women, and he married, I believe, 3 white women. And he opened up a restaurant called Cafe des Champions that allowed people to come in that were white, black, whatever color they were. It completely integrated. And he was eventually arrested for the Mann Act. The Mann Act was a law that prohibited white prostitution and white slavery. And he was accused of taking a prostitute across state lines. He served a year in the penitentiary. But can you imagine the guts he had to defy the norms and the social mores of the time and marry not 1 white woman, but 3 white women, of course, at different times. He wasn't a bigamist, but he definitely was his own man, and he defied what the current social norms were. He did what he wanted to do. And he led a very flamboyant life. And I was recently told that he had a couple of patents for different instruments. Just an amazing man. He had the restaurant was called Champions Cafe de Champions during intense segregation. He died in an automobile wreck because he liked fast cars at the age of 67. So he's got a park, he's got the statue, and he's got a street named after him. John Arthur Jack Johnson, the legendary Jack Johnson. I'm done, thank you.
Okay, now we're going to Parish Life Center.
Where are we going?
Parish Life Center.
Okay, Parish Life Center.
Parish Life Center.
Are we on schedule? I hope so. $25. We're not going to go to the Moody Mansion. We're not going to see the Moody Mansion. That's pretty important. I think we should stop and look at let our passengers see the Moody Mansion. It's on Broadway. It's gonna have to get back on Broadway. What? Who built this mansion was a philanthropist. Before he became a philanthropist, he was an entrepreneur and a financier in Galveston. And he donated thousands and thousands of dollars and was instrumental in building the insurance company and the only skyscraper in Galveston, which, if we have an opportunity, you can take a look at it. It's the lone skyscraper. Yes? It's in the book. Bob W.L. Moody. Okay. He built the mansion. Oh, okay. The Moody Mansion is located at 2618 Broadway. It's 28,000 square feet. We're going to be approaching it very soon. It's 4 stories. It's on the National Register for Historic Places. And the mansion was built by the patriarch W.L. Moody, who was born in 1865. And you know what date that was? Okay. He died in 1954, so he had a long life. He founded a private bank, an insurance company, and one of the largest charitable foundations in the United States. Mary Moody Northern was his oldest daughter, and my mother was her private duty nurse. So I was in and out of that Moody Mansion growing up. The Moody's helped finance my education. It's to your left.
Okay.
Yeah, it's to the left. It's
About to turn.
you're not able to turn.
We see like
Yeah. I wish you could get back on Broadway or go around and come back and go back east so you can see this mansion, at least the front of it. It's quite interesting. Yeah, go ahead. But we'll hope the other ones will turn too. Yeah, get in the right lane. Yeah, there you go. They not gonna give you no ticket. Okay, it's to your right. The Moody Mansion is to your right. It's quite a structure. Yeah, to your right. That's the Moody Mansion. It's Mary Moody Northern, the daughter of W.L. Moody, lived in there until it was damaged by one of the hurricanes, and then she had to leave. She lived in the mansion from 1954 to 1983. And it's quite ornate. It's got some beautiful things in it. And there's a kitchen underneath. And I used to talk to the maid and the cook down there when I would go visit my mother and bring her lunch. But it's quite a structure. That's the Moody Scholarship, the Moody Gardens. That all comes from W.L. Moody. That was his foundation, and that is the Moody Mansion. And thank you for turning around to let everyone see this. It's no one lives here now, but it is open for tours. But when I was growing up, uh, my mother my mother worked a 12-hour shift. She had 24-hour nurses, and my mother worked the 7P to 7A shift, and that's where we would come see her. And my mother traveled with Mary Moody Northern. Thank you. Traveled with her all through the various trips, the philanthropic trips that she made, donating money. My mother would accompany her. So we would always look forward to Mama going on a trip because she'd always bring us something back. Okay. Any questions? Moody Mansion. You could connect that with W.L. Moody. You want to go back to the parish family now? Thank you for being so flexible. Yeah, this is worth saying, I believe. Oh, that's the dog. Oh, now you're gonna have to go back east. Make a right in the corner.
Right to be at the same place. Bus number 3.
Who is that a statue of?
Uh, on Broadway?
Up there. To our left. Right there. On top. Looks like.
I'm not sure.
That's a so
Now you're going to 25th. You're going to turn, when you get back on Broadway, you're going to make a right on 25th Street, or unless you go 15, 25, 25th Street. And this is 26 right here. Okay. You're going to just go and make a left on 25th? Okay. It's like 15, 25, 25th.
People that.
You're need to make a left. Okay.
So what church were they in? Wire. It was so.
Jack Johnson Park again to your right.
Jack Johnson.
Where exactly are we supposed to be going here?
Okay, right here, that's what.
We're close. 1525 25th Street. This is 25th Street right here.
Turn right over
Yeah, right. You got to turn right. I'm not sure exactly where we're supposed to be meeting. So this is 1525. This is the 2500 block.
I think that's it because we've been to a reception.
Is it right here?
there.
Yes.
That's what they.
So you want him to go into the grounds, into the parking lot?
Yes.
Oh, go ahead into the parking lot, sir. This
Oh.
this is a stop. No, look, Doris, we got all of this we have not seen yet. This was formerly O'Connell Junior High School. This is the high school I attended, and it was formerly, before it became a junior high school, it was Ursuline Academy. The Ursuline nuns ran it. Thank you so much.
Okay, folks, we'll be right back after this break. Amen.
Yeah, we just gonna pass. We're not stopping anyway. You're gonna drive slowly. Let me, I'm gonna tap you.
No, because we got.
The mic. Oh, it's on the floor. Lord have mercy. I'm sorry. Can't look at the stuff. Sorry. If you look to your left, you'll see something that's not on the guide, but it is a pretty impressive structure. It is a garden marine. It's used for social activities. Look to your left. And the park that it is housing this structure is Menard Park. No, where's it? Kempner Park. Sorry. Kempner Park. That's Kempner Park, and that's that what you just saw the structure. Back to your left is the Kermit Kerrville Stadium. Going to Ashton Blue, so when you get on Broadway, you're gonna make a right, okay? Because you're going east.
So where I get back. Like cross.
Yeah, I think you can turn okay. Yeah, turn okay. Yeah. Oh, that looks lovely too.
Oh my God.
Maybe it's not. Let's try. Try and see if you can get through.
It's a fire truck.
That's Ashton Villa on Broadway
On the left?
on the left. Well, that's what it is.
Car spaces. So that-
Ah,
Yeah, this, you can get through.
You know, they didn't flag out Broadway.
well, it's a fast trip.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's not a lot of fun. Okay. That skyscraper to your left, that is the American National Insurance Company that was founded by W.L. Moody, the philanthropist. Go straight across Broadway. St. Mary's is on the other side of Broadway.
Mommy.
That is the oldest AME church in
And there's
Texas.
Reedy Church.
what Joe Biden is supposed to be.
Yep. Yep.
We gotta get to church. 2,000 block of church. It's ball.
Probably keep it
Just keep straight. Just keep straight. Go around. This is Winnie. Keep straight. That church is on that one-way street. Make a left and you're. This is not it, but make a left and you'll be. Yeah, make a left.
It's a one-way street.
Keep going. St. Mary's is right here. This is St. Mary's.
To the left?
To the left.
Yes.
That's St. Mary's to the left. So I imagine you can park along here. There's nothing but a worn out movie theater. This is St. Mary's to your left.
Like that driveway.
And then
One of the few buildings in Galveston that survived the 1900s storm, the Great Storm, with minimal damage. but it did sustain significant water damage during Hurricane Ike in 2008. St. Mary's, along with Sacred Heart Co-Cathedral in Houston, are the designated sites for the 2025 Jubilee Year of Hope. And I believe you're all going to be attending Mass at St. Mary's.
Celebrated by the court.
What was that, Paul?
Celebrated by the court. The court.
Paul added that it's celebrated by the Cardinal. Okay. Gloria, what happens after Mass? What are the instructions? Because the bus driver wants to know.
I don't know, we have to ask Father.
You got to ask Father.
I
Yes.
hope we can go to the Jew.
Architecturally, they are landmarks and incredibly beautiful. But see if you can see that. Sacred Heart Cathedral and the Sacred Heart on 14th and Broadway. Bishop's Palace is right across the street. And he's going to need to know.
Okay.
Oh,